Hello, Covenant family. Pastor John here to introduce Psalm 120, the first psalm in the Songs of Ascents. Let's look at the psalm together. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and He answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue? A warrior's sharp arrows with glowing coals of the broom tree. Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Now, as I like to think of this psalm from start to finish, I say, ironically, in a psalm in which the psalmist says, I am for peace, it begins with distress and ends with war. So how can this psalmist be for peace? And it seems as if strife runs from start to finish in this psalm. But even though this psalm can sound a bit rough, a bit edgy, a bit harsh, what it's describing is something that would be very familiar to all of us. And that is that the psalmist is slandered. He is opposed. He is persecuted for who he is, implying that he is a child of God and is being slandered and persecuted for it. And so he cries out right from the beginning of this psalm, praying to the Lord. And he cries out for deliverance, to be delivered from the lying tongue, or rather the lying lips, and a deceitful tongue. There are those who do, in fact, slander Christians. And this is nothing new. If you think about, in terms of the Old Testament church and the New Testament church, we can go back, and there are numerous examples. But immediately I think about Potiphar's wife and how she lied about Joseph, which resulted in him being imprisoned. We think about in the New Testament church in the first century, we know that Christians were accused of incest because they called one another brother and sister, or they were accused of cannibalism because they referred to the Lord's Supper as the flesh and blood of Christ. And again, there are so many different examples that we could pull from throughout church history, but the fact is that the world, whose God is the father of lies, John chapter 8, verse 44, will in fact lie about and slander the children of God. And the psalmist is crying out to God because, as we were told as children, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me is just not true. Words do hurt, and in fact, especially if they are lies, and especially if they are lies that get to the very core of our being, who we are as children of God. And so this psalm is certainly a lament, a crying out to God and lamenting the way of the world, but so also it is calling for God's justice. It's calling for God's judgment upon the lying tongue. In fact, he uses the picture of the broom tree, which was a very tall tree in the desert, and it was known for producing very good coals, very good charcoal, and he's crying out to God, pour arrows of judgment upon those of a deceitful tongue. He desires justice because he is being wrongly maligned for God's sake. He also talks about dwelling in the midst of or living with those who are for war while he is for peace. And it specifically says, but when I speak, And so again, it's the idea that the psalmist is one who is living out his faith. He is speaking truth. And when he speaks that truth, then he is opposed. And in fact, while he desires peace, those who hear him speak are for war. And again, the idea is a contrast here. Those who are opposed to the truth that he is speaking, they desire to battle, to wage war against him because, or rather in opposition to the truth that he's speaking. Well, again, this is the life in which we live. This is the world that we live in, a world that is opposed to He who is the way, the truth, and the life, a world who will stand against anything that is the truth of God, including the saints who proclaim the truth. Where we need to be careful is to be careful that we are not those who have lying lips or a deceitful tongue. We need to be characterized as those who indeed, as the psalmist does, speak the truth and live the truth. Well, you can see there are all sorts of applications that we can draw from this short psalm, and that's exactly what we'll be doing this coming Sunday. So let me encourage you to come, to join us. It would be a wonderful idea to go ahead and read Psalm 120 before you come and be thinking through the different verses of this psalm. And then let's worship together. This coming Lord's Day, please join us. Until then, may God continue to bless you in your study of His Word.